It was a Tuesday afternoon when I first walked into Mike's Auto Repair on the edge of our small town. The kind of place with oil stains that had become permanent fixtures on the concrete floor and the persistent smell of rubber, metal, and something distinctly masculine that I couldn't quite place. I hadn't planned on ending up there, but my car had other ideas. The check engine light had been flickering for days, and when the strange knocking sound started, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'd driven past this shop countless times, but never had a reason to stop. Now, with my car making sounds that resembled a washing machine full of shoes, I didn't have much choice. As I pulled into the gravel parking lot, I felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness. I'd always been somewhat intimidated by car shops, the technical jargon, the potential for being overcharged, and if I'm being completely honest, the hypermasculine environment that sometimes made me feel out of place. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage before stepping out into the warm afternoon sun. The large garage door was open, and I could see someone bent over the engine of an old Ford pickup. I approached hesitantly, clearing my throat to announce my presence. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. That's when he straightened up and turned around, and I felt something shift inside me. The mechanic who stood before me wiped his hands on a red shop rag, leaving smudges of grease that somehow only enhanced his appearance rather than diminishing it. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair cropped short on the sides, but slightly longer on top. His face had the weathered quality of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors, with laugh lines around eyes that were a surprisingly bright blue against his tan skin. "What can I help you with?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant, with a slight drawl that suggested he wasn't originally from our town. I found myself momentarily distracted by the way his forearms looked as he crossed them over his chest, strong and defined, with veins visible beneath the skin. I realized I was staring and quickly snapped my attention back to the matter at hand. "My car," I stammered, pointing unnecessarily to where it sat in the parking lot. "It's making a strange noise, and the check engine light is on." I felt foolish as soon as the words left my mouth. Of course that's why I was here. People don't typically visit mechanics for casual conversation. But he just nodded, seemingly unbothered by my awkwardness. "Let's take a look," he said, gesturing for me to lead the way back to my vehicle. As we walked, I noticed he had a slight limp, barely perceptible unless you were paying attention, which apparently I was. Very close attention. "I'm Jason, by the way," he offered, extending his hand once we reached my car. "Alex," I replied, taking his hand and trying not to focus on how completely my own was enveloped in his grip or the calluses I could feel against my palm. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, confident, like everything else about him seemed to be. I popped the hood, and Jason leaned in to examine the engine. I stood back, unsure of what to do with myself as he methodically checked various components, occasionally making thoughtful humming sounds. There was something mesmerizing about watching him work, the certainty in his movements, the focus in his expression. I found myself studying the way his shoulder blades moved beneath his gray t-shirt, the shop's logo faded from numerous washes. "When does it make the noise?" he asked, glancing up at me. "Just when you start it, or while driving too?" "Both, but it's worse when I accelerate," I explained, surprised at how my voice had steadied. "And sometimes there's this burning smell." Jason nodded, as if this confirmed something. "I have a hunch, but I'd like to get it up on the lift to be sure. Do you have time now, or do you need to drop it off?" I checked my watch. I had planned to work from home that afternoon, but my laptop was in my backpack, and I could easily reschedule my one Zoom call. "I can wait," I decided, surprising myself a little. Normally, I would have dropped the car off to avoid the awkward waiting room experience, but something made me want to stay. "Great," Jason said with a smile that created a dimple in his right cheek. "It'll probably take about an hour. You can wait in the office if you want. There's coffee, though I can't promise it's good." I followed him inside, where he introduced me to the office manager, an older woman named Darlene who looked like she could run the place with her eyes closed. She got my information and told me to make myself comfortable. The waiting area consisted of a few worn chairs, automotive magazines from at least 5 years ago, and a TV mounted on the wall playing a game show with the volume low. I settled in with my laptop, intending to get some work done, but found my attention repeatedly drawn to the large window that looked out onto the garage where Jason had now raised my car on the hydraulic lift. There was something captivating about watching someone who clearly knew what they were doing, completely in their element. His confidence was attractive in a way I hadn't anticipated. About 20 minutes into my wait, Jason appeared at the office door. "Alex, can you come take a look at something?" he asked, his expression unreadable. My stomach dropped. In my experience, being called into the garage was never good news. It usually meant they'd found something expensive that needed fixing. I followed him back to where my car was suspended above us, its undercarriage exposed. "I want to show you what I'm seeing," Jason explained, grabbing a flashlight from his workbench. "It'll help you understand what's going on." He gestured for me to stand beside him under the car and pointed the beam of light toward a particular area of the engine. "See that?" he asked, his voice close to my ear. I leaned in, trying to make sense of the mechanical components. All I could see was a jumble of metal parts and hoses. "Not really," I admitted. Jason chuckled, the sound warming something inside me. "Here," he said, moving slightly behind me. "Hold the flashlight, and I'll point it out." He handed me the heavy industrial flashlight, his fingers brushing against mine in a way that sent an unexpected current up my arm. I took the flashlight, aiming it where he had been pointing, acutely aware of his presence just inches behind me. The garage suddenly felt much warmer than it had moments before. "No, a little to the left," Jason instructed, and then, without warning, his hand was on mine, adjusting the angle of the light. His chest was almost touching my back as he guided my hand, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The smell of him, a mixture of soap, sweat, and motor oil, filled my senses, making it difficult to concentrate on whatever mechanical issue he was trying to show me. "Right there," he said, his voice lower now, perhaps because of our proximity. "See that gasket? It's cracked and leaking oil onto the exhaust manifold. That's what's causing the burning smell." I nodded, though I still wasn't entirely sure what I was looking at. What I was sure of was the way my heart had accelerated, pounding so loudly I wondered if he could hear it over the background noise of the garage. His hand remained on mine, ostensibly to keep the light steady, but there was something in the gentle pressure of his fingers that felt deliberate. In that moment, something shifted between us, a recognition that this interaction had moved beyond the professional boundaries of mechanic and customer. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, causing the fine hairs there to stand on end. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching out as I became hyper-aware of every sensation. The rough texture of the flashlight in my palm, the warmth of his hand over mine, the solid presence of him behind me. Without overthinking it, I made a decision. Slowly, I turned my hand beneath his, releasing the flashlight with my other hand so that it was now Jason holding it. In one fluid motion, I wrapped my fingers around his, reversing our positions so that I was now holding his hand as he held the flashlight. There was a moment of perfect stillness where neither of us moved or spoke. I held my breath, suddenly terrified that I had completely misread the situation and made a terrible mistake. But then I felt it, the slight tightening of his fingers against mine, an acknowledgement, an acceptance. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see his face in my peripheral vision. Jason was looking at me with an expression of surprise that quickly melted into something softer, more vulnerable. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth, and I watched as he swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He began, his voice rougher than before. "I don't usually, with customers." I turned around fully then, our hands still connected around the flashlight between us. We were standing close, too close for this to be anything but intentional. "I don't usually make moves on my mechanic," I countered, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "But there's something about you." Jason's smile widened, revealing that dimple again. "I felt it too," he admitted, his eyes searching mine. "From the moment you walked in." He hesitated, then added, "But I wasn't sure if you were interested, or if I even like guys." I finished for him, returning his smile. "I do, particularly ones who know their way around an engine." He laughed at that, the sound rich and genuine, and something in my chest expanded. The tension between us shifted, transforming from uncertain attraction to mutual acknowledgement. Jason carefully placed the flashlight on a nearby workbench, but he didn't let go of my hand. Instead, he adjusted his grip so that our fingers were properly intertwined. "I should probably finish fixing your car," he said, though he made no move to step away. "Probably," I agreed, equally reluctant to break the moment. But maybe after that, we could continue this conversation somewhere else. Over coffee, perhaps. Jason nodded, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand in a way that made it difficult to focus. I'd like that, he said. Though I should warn you, I know a lot more about cars than I do about dating. That's okay, I assured him. I'm not looking for an expert. Just someone genuine. The look he gave me then, part relief, part happiness, part something deeper, made my heart skip. He reluctantly released my hand and stepped back, professional responsibility reasserting itself. Let me finish up here, and then we can figure out the details. I watched as he returned to work on my car, his movements still precise and confident, but now there was a new energy about him, a lightness that hadn't been there before. Occasionally, he would glance over at me and smile, as if making sure I was still there, that what had happened between us was real. As he worked, we talked about our lives, our backgrounds, our interests beyond cars and whatever it was I did for work, which he seemed genuinely curious about. I learned that he had taken over the shop from his uncle 3 years ago, that he had served in the military before that, which explained the almost imperceptible limp. He had grown up 2 towns over, but had moved here after his discharge, looking for a quieter life. I told him about my job in graphic design, how I had recently started working remotely, which gave me more flexibility, but sometimes left me feeling isolated. I mentioned my small apartment downtown, my cat named Pixel, and my hobby of photography on weekends. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the sounds of tools against metal and the occasional interruption when Jason needed to concentrate on a particularly tricky aspect of the repair. There was a comfortable quality to our interaction that belied the fact that we had just met. It felt like reconnecting with someone I already knew rather than getting to know someone new. When he finally lowered my car back to the ground, wiping his hands on that same red shop rag, I felt a twinge of disappointment that our time together was coming to an end. But as he explained what he had fixed and what the cost would be, surprisingly reasonable, there was an undercurrent of anticipation between us, a shared knowledge that this wasn't ending, but rather just beginning. So, he said after I had paid and Darlene had handed me my receipt with a knowing smile that suggested she hadn't missed the change in atmosphere between us. About that coffee. I'm free now, I suggested, trying not to sound too eager. Unless you have more cars to fix. Jason glanced at his watch. I was planning to close up soon anyway. Give me 15 minutes to clean up. I nodded, suddenly feeling shy again despite everything that had passed between us. I'll wait outside. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as I leaned against my newly repaired car, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything on the screen. My mind was too busy replaying the moment when I had wrapped my hands around his, the look on his face when I turned around, the feeling of his thumb tracing patterns on my skin. True to his word, Jason emerged from the shop 15 minutes later, transformed. He had changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a clean blue button-down shirt that made his eyes look even more striking. His hair was damp, suggesting he had washed up thoroughly, and I caught the faint scent of cologne as he approached. You clean up nice, I commented, appreciating the way the shirt fit across his shoulders. Had to make an effort, he replied with a grin. Not every day I get coffee with someone who makes holding a flashlight look like an art form. I laughed, the last of my nervousness dissolving. Is that your standard pickup line for customers? Hey, come hold this flashlight with me. Jason's expression turned more serious, though his eyes still held warmth. You're the first, he said simply. I've never done anything like that before. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me. Me neither, I admitted. But I'm glad I did. We decided to take separate cars to a small cafe downtown, one of those independent places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. As we sat across from each other at a corner table, steam rising from our mugs, I marveled at how quickly life could change. This morning, I had been dreading dealing with car troubles. Now, I was sitting across from a man who made my heart race with just a smile, all because I had taken a chance and wrapped my hands around his. The conversation continued to flow easily between us, moving from surface-level topics to deeper ones. Our families, our past relationships, our hopes for the future. I learned that Jason had been single for nearly 2 years, focusing on building his business after a relationship that had ended badly. He admitted that he had been hesitant to date again, especially in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. But then you walked into my shop, he said, his eyes holding mine across the table. And suddenly all those reasons didn't seem to matter anymore. As the cafe began to close around us, we reluctantly gathered our things, neither of us ready for the evening to end. Standing on the sidewalk outside, the streetlights creating pools of yellow light in the gathering dusk, we faced each other. I had a really good time, I said, aware of how inadequate the words were to express what I was feeling. Me too, Jason replied, taking a step closer. And I'd like to see you again. Properly, I mean. A real date. My heart sorted his words. I'd like that too. He reached out then, his hand finding mine, our fingers intertwining just as they had in the garage. But this time, there was no flashlight between us, no pretense of showing me an engine part. Just the simple, powerful connection of his skin against mine. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice low and slightly rough around the edges. In answer, I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. The first touch of his lips against mine was gentle, questioning. But when I responded, wrapping my free hand around the back of his neck, the kiss deepened. I could taste coffee and something sweeter, possibility, perhaps, or the beginning of something neither of us had been looking for, but had found anyway. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jason rested his forehead against mine. I never thought I'd be grateful for a check engine light, he murmured, making me laugh. We made plans to meet again in 2 days, exchanging phone numbers and one more kiss before reluctantly parting ways to our separate cars. As I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling, replaying every moment of our unexpected encounter in my mind. The next day, I received a text from Jason, just checking that your car is running smoothly, and that you're still interested in dinner tomorrow. My reply was immediate. Car is perfect. And yes, definitely still interested. Our first official date led to a second and a third, and soon we were seeing each other regularly. Jason introduced me to his friends, I introduced him to mine, and we navigated the inevitable small-town gossip with good humor. It turned out that Darlene, the office manager, had been quietly rooting for us from the beginning, having noticed the chemistry between us even before we did. 2 months after that first meeting in the garage, Jason took me back to his shop after hours. The place was quiet, the tools put away, the concrete floor swept clean. He led me to the exact spot where we had stood that first day, beneath where my car had been suspended on the lift. I wanted to bring you back here, he explained, taking both my hands in his, because this is where everything changed for me, where you changed everything. My throat tightened with emotion as I squeezed his hands. All because you asked me to hold a flashlight. And you held my hand instead, he finished, pulling me closer. Best mistake a customer ever made. I laughed, wrapping my arms around his neck. I think you mean best decision. As his lips found mine in the quiet of the garage where our story had begun, I silently thanked my car for breaking down, the universe for leading me to Mike's auto repair, and myself for having the courage to reach for what I wanted. Sometimes the most unexpected places, like a small-town mechanic shop, turn out to be exactly where you're meant to be. And sometimes the simple act of holding someone's hand can be the beginning of holding their heart. What started as a routine car repair had become the most important detour of my life, leading me not just to fixed engine problems, but to a connection I hadn't known I was looking for. As Jason and I left the shop that night, hands intertwined and hearts full, I knew that whatever road we traveled next, we would be navigating it together. All because I wrapped my hands around his instead of that flashlight, taking a chance on a connection that sparked in the most unexpected of places. Total _char_count. 18,532.